Can you
Yes,
hear
of
me?
course.
Yes. Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah. Oh my God, I should have sent them to you then. Forward the messages. I saw that some teachers were saying that you are their crush.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a new one. That's not happened in a while.
Yes,
Okay.
Chris. I know. Yeah. So I thought that you should really know that. And keeping that in mind, we can start our presentation, I think.
Cool. Cool.
So, ladies and gentlemen, just to be serious, please welcome our next speaker, a teacher trainer with lots of really like various experience. The person I think who knows actually a lot of stuff about methodology. A CELTA and a Delta trainer, Christopher Reese. Your loud applause.
Yeah, well, thank you guys very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be kind of speaking in different places, and pleasure to be back speaking with Win again because it's been quite a while since I've been here. Um, so the session title kind of speaks for itself. Teach pronunciation with confidence. This is something that pronunciation is something I've always enjoyed dealing with, probably because my mother was a music teacher, honestly. So I've been stuck kind of dealing with things related to sound my entire life. But it's something that I've been giving talks to teachers for. I guess the first one I did was back in 2018 on pronunciation, so it's been quite a while. In that time, I found that teachers often come to sessions on pronunciation with different areas in which they may not feel fully confident, or areas where they think, well, I'd really like to learn more about a certain thing. So this session is going to be a little bit flexible today in that I am going to be responding to you guys a little bit. So the first question that I would like us to do, and you can send this into the chat, I'd like us to take about 3-4 minutes, maybe not even that long. Think about what questions you personally have about teaching pronunciation or what things you would be interested in. And I will be doing my best during the session to answer as many of these as I can. So think about your own questions. You can write them in the chat. No question is too big or too small. Already 3 very good questions coming in. Okay, okay. More excellent questions. I love the very specific question from Victoria. It was very good to see. But I've had very similar versions of that question come up very often. It's a very good question. Marina, looking at the big picture a little bit. Let's take about 1 more minute for those questions to come in. Communicative, very good question. I can practice and use it. If they're not interested, I may have bad news about that one, but we'll see. There will be things we can do, don't worry. So, okay, cool. I think we got enough to at least start with. I'm sure if more questions come up, drop them in the chat and we'll deal with them as we're able to. This is just giving me a frame of where we're coming from. A very nice question coming from Ilona about what if students don't like drills or drilling. Cool. So these are some of the things I'm going to try to answer as many of these as I can during the session today. The good news is you will find the majority of these answers in the session already. If I've missed any towards the end, I will come back and try to get as many of them as I can. How to make sense, not demonize their Ukrainian accent. But these are some things we're going to deal with right at the very beginning. So cool, let's dive in. So one little place for us just to start off with, many of us come from different backgrounds in teaching. Some of us come from a very strong linguistics background. Some of us have more of a professional, let's call it, background as teachers. The way that I'm going to be approaching pronunciation in this session is very much as a teacher, not as a linguist. That doesn't mean that we're going to be doing things that are linguistically wrong, but it means that there may be, well, I won't be using all the super clever terminology. I may not describe things during the session in a very linguistic-y way, because very often for our students, that's a level of depth that they may not require. So when we talk about linguists, these are people who are often aiming to describe language, not necessarily help people learn it. We're looking at things today from the teaching side. So one kind of general point is that these broad rules that may come up in linguistics, they may not be super helpful for teaching, and vice versa. Some things that may be very helpful for teaching may not hold very much water in a linguistic setting. So bearing that in mind, let's start from the big question. We're talking about teaching pronunciation with confidence, but we probably need to start with what pronunciation we teach. And in the modern world, there are 2 realities that we need to look at. One is that many students may not need to or want to sound like native speakers. One example of this is where I live currently. I live and work in Thailand currently, in Bangkok. Bangkok is an extremely international city. You absolutely meet people here who speak English. Most of the foreign population here speaks English, but even on the floor where I live, there is another Ukrainian family, an Albanian girl, we have a Frenchman, we've got people from all over who all cooperate and who all speak to each other in English. For these people, having a, let's say, quote unquote, native speaker accent, which we might more specifically call a particular small group of people who have a certain passport and were born in a certain area. Even in the UK, if you go from one city to the next, from London to Manchester, you see a completely different accent. And the same US if you go from one region to another, and other English-speaking countries as well. So this is to say that not all of the students will need to, or even want to, develop this quote-unquote native-like pronunciation, which gets to something that we might call English as a lingua franca. In other words, these students will need a pronunciation that is easily intelligible, that is easy for people to understand. But as long as we're at that point where it is easy and effortless to understand, the exact qualities of some sounds may not be as important to them. Other students will need to or want to sound like speakers from a particular background. This is very commonly true for people who are immigrants, who move to a new country. If someone has relocated to, as the example before, to Edinburgh, they may be very interested in picking up an Edinburgh accent, if just to sound like they're not from somewhere else. Or it could just be a matter that they just like it a lot. This person likes a certain accent and they want to speak more in that way. I'm currently working with a student like this who very much likes the California accent and wants to sound like they are from California. So, okay, this is not every student, but this is some students. So when it comes to this, what pronunciation do we teach? Do they quote unquote need to sound like quote unquote native speakers? A starting point is, well, what is that student's goal and what are their needs? If this is something that that particular student is interested in, fantastic, we can work in that direction. If it's something that they don't need and they're not interested in, well, maybe clearly intelligible is good enough for that student. There may be more important things that that student's trying to work on at any given point, at least to them. So when we talk about teaching pronunciation in general, just to ground the session a little bit, we're going to be following 4 general steps. Working from reception, receiving the sound, then to articulating the sound. That is, can the students use or do the appropriate physical movements to produce the sound? This is something that can be tricky for individual sounds and longer stretches of language once we start putting things together. Do they have opportunities to practice? And the last bit, can we motivate them to want to work on pronunciation if they need to? Even if that level of intelligibility and being clear is their only goal, getting them to that sometimes can still be a challenge. So how do we do this then? How can we focus on this? We're going to start from the very top. We're going to work our way up, going from individual sounds to slowly larger bits of language. I'm going to be showing several different activities and things that we might focus on. We'll stop at certain points to discuss different things that might be important at each step. So we're starting off with individual sounds, where someone asked about these earlier. And we have our phonemic transcription symbols. Just a quick show of hands. Can we have people in the chat? If you use these occasionally while teaching, can you drop a plus in the chat? If you think these are evil and never touch them, can you put a minus in the chat? Okay, so it seems like we've got a pretty positive impression of these. I don't see many minuses coming in, although people saying we use them sparingly or we use them rarely, which is reasonable. Many students have a relatively shaky understanding of these. Students are often, they might know them a little bit, but they're not super precise with their knowledge, partially because they don't necessarily understand how the sounds are organized. We're going to work through a short activity together. Now, we'll have microphones off for this, but you can follow along with me while I'm doing it, because like Yana says, it is important to distinguish between certain things. There is a way that this part of the chart in particular is organized. And this is not, we're about to, actually not my demonstration. This is actually a demonstration done by Mr. Adrian Underhill, who's a very well-respected author when it comes to pronunciation work and teaching. We're going to start with this sound. So can you all please just follow along with me? Can we all make the ooh sound? Can you don't have to make it if you're in public, although you can if you want to scare the people around you. Just make the ooh and kind of keep your lips where they need to be for that ooh sound. You can just leave them forward. You'll make a little bit of a kissy face. It looks a bit odd, honestly. What we're going to do then is we're going to glide over to our E sound. So I'm going to keep the air from here, and I'm just going to widen my mouth. So ooh, and as we get to the last bit, our mouth is fully open. Or we can do the same the other way. We can start with E, ooh. So from left to right, we have the width of the mouth. And from top to bottom, we start with E, ah. We have the opening of the jaw. And it's true if we were to go through this for all of these. The takeaway from this is that, okay, at the most basic level, I know this is revision for a lot of us. At the basic level, the students have to know this. They've got to know for this ah sound, because for many learners, if we think about Ukrainian learners in particular, and ah are a struggle. Knowing that my mouth has to be wider here, that my mouth needs to open more, helps to distinguish between them, and it also gives us a cue that we can use to correct learners. So if they're making a mistake, I just bought a new bag for my apartment, or how do you feel today? Oh, I feel pretty bad. If we need to correct them, this gives us a cue. We can say, okay, no, sorry, I feel pretty, open the mouth a bit wider, or close the mouth a little bit. Focusing on this way that we make the sound, these points of articulation, we might call them, gives us a tool. One way that we can present this with students is by organizing these into pairs. For example, 2 sounds that are often very difficult are these 2 with E and I. So we're going to do a little activity with them. Here you can see something called the pronunciation journey. We're going to make, for our pronunciation journey, we're going to make left. We're going to make this the long E sound. And right, we're going to make the short, I'll have to draw it, the short I sound. The way this activity works is that if you hear a word that has the I sound or the E sound, you'll go that direction. It sounds like bit, go to the right. E sounds like beat, go to the left. So follow along, try to see which city we end up in. Ready, steady. So word number 1, hit. 2, seat. 3, eat. Hit, seat, eat. What city have we finished in? Oh, sorry, I need a 4th one. Hit, seat, eat, lit. So we had hit, seat, eat, and then lit. Right, so if we go through one more together, it can help us get the activity. The next one will be meet, beat, mit, sit. What city are we in? Yeah, we wind up in New York. So this is a simple activity that we can use to help our learners distinguish between the sounds and then move them into productive practice. We can then put them in pairs, give them lists of words with E and I sounds, have them distinguish between them. This activity is useful. We could do it in different ways. We can give them a map of Europe and put a grid over it, have them move in directions based on the sounds. We can give them a street map, have them give directions using it. We can make this look in different directions, or we can organize this activity in different ways. The principle behind it is that the students have to hear the sound, discriminate between what they hear, and then choose a direction to go. And then as they start to lead the activity, which would be the next step, they then transition to that second step of the flowchart, that they're starting to produce the sound accurately, and they have to be accurate or else their partner gets lost. So by using the rules of the game, we are encouraging them to be accurate. We're letting the game sort of regulate them a little bit. Activities like these are one way that we can do things. There's another more, let's say, humanistic way that we might approach this though as well. We might also get them to personalize things a little bit, especially if our learners have just been introduced to maybe a few different sounds. We've been working on pronunciation a little bit. Getting them to personalize or create their own memory devices for things can be quite helpful. So, for example, I might say that the first one, I was just home visiting family. So I'm going to say that E is like the sound my father's brakes are making currently. Every time he stops the car, it's E. It's not good, honestly. If I compare with another sound, I might make another sentence something like, I'll have to draw it here, that this phoneme sh, if I make this for me, is like the quiet sound. So building connections. Take a second, can everyone in the chat write their own? Pick one of the sounds, one of the phonemes, could be any, and think about a connection, something from your life or your associations that you could connect with that sound. What sentence could you make? For example, s is like, z is like, ch is like. Yana? Interesting. Schwa's the sound for is like the sound I'm thinking. Cool. Okay.
I mean, like,
Yeah. Although for me, sometimes it's the opposite. That's the sound I make when my brain's not working. It's like I'm tired and annoyed. So yeah, it's the beginning of the word, right? So we can see some creative ideas here. So this is something, I think, a dimension that we often forget in pronunciation practice. We're often very, very good at making it technical. This more humanistic bend to it, making personal connections, can also be helpful in encouraging those students to make things more memorable, especially if we're dealing with sounds that maybe don't exist in their first language. Another variation of this activity is we can ask them to assign adjectives. This is something I've done with lower level classes quite frequently, especially after we revise things like superlatives, just because, hey, I get something for free. What's the happiest sound in English? What's the saddest sound? What's the funniest sound? There's no right or wrong answers here. So they can say that cheese is the happiest sound in English. Why? Because I love cheese. Cheese makes me happy. Okay, cool. That's the answer. As an extension, we can also get them to think about words that fit this rule. For example, a happy word with ch. In my case, that would be cheese. We can also have them think of a word that doesn't fit their explanation. So if I think about a word that's an unhappy word with ch, challenge, I think might fit that. So now we've gone from just practicing the pronunciation to now we're getting a little bit of vocab revision for free, a little bit of grammar revision for free, but also starting to get a little bit more critical thinking engaged. So just because we're working on individual sounds doesn't mean that what the students are producing is limited to the individual sounds. It just means that that's going to be the focus, and that's really what we're going to dial in for them. If we go a step larger, then we can go to words. Now, words actually have been appearing a lot more in course books. If you open a textbook, you'll often see activities that are related to words. I cracked open a course book while I was prepping the session today, and here's one that I found. It was a very nice lesson on compound adjectives. Had a nice little make the adjectives activity, a nice little what do you think they mean? Okay, course book author ran out of space on the page, fine. And a little bit of focus on pronunciation. Listen and mark the main stress. Cool. And listen and practice saying. Cool. We've got a little bit of drilling, I suppose. Materials led rather than teacher led. The problem is that this is where a lot of materials stop, even when they do include it. So very often we can get our students to this point of, okay, I know which part of the words to stress. I know it's easygoing, not easygoing. But what do we do from there? One activity that I'm fond of, because you can make them relatively quickly, are mazes. Here I've got a short maze, which is made up of a whole bunch of compounds, compound nouns, compound adjectives, etc. I've got a start point, I've got an end point. In order to get from the beginning to the end, you've got to find all of the words where the stress is on the second word. You can go up, down, left, or right, cannot go diagonally. Let's do the first couple together. If I start from the first one, kind-hearted, I've got two options. I can go down to traffic jam or to well-known. Which one's the better fit? Yeah, people saying well-known, excellent. Take about 30 seconds to a minute. See how far you can get. What's the path to the exit? You may need to say some of these aloud to yourself to find the exit. Take about 20 more seconds, see how far you can get. Cool. So I'm going to show the correct path. And I believe it's this. Yeah. I actually can't see because my chat box is over the end of it. Let me just double check. Yes. Okay. So, and Jana has got it absolutely right that the path here is through the compound adjectives, not the nouns. This is true. In my experience, even for something like this, students are very often much worse at identifying the compound adjectives than one might think. But we could adapt this very easily we could do it the other way. It could be for find the words where the stress is on the first syllable, or it could be in two-syllable verbs or adjectives, sorry, two-syllable verbs and nouns. Find the ones where the stress is on the first syllable or the second. So we can choose what criteria we want for the students to kind of get from the beginning to the end. And then once we make the path, the rest just get filled in with things that are believable. And there's the activity. These activities are best set as pair or group work because that will encourage the students to say them aloud to each other while they're working. If they're done as individual work, sometimes the students will do it quietly to themselves. It's very difficult to hear what they're saying. Making it something collaborative means they also have a chance to maybe correct each other a little bit. Or if the question comes up, you'll hear them discussing it, which is a bit easier to deal with. Another variation of this, we could also use for collocations. Here you can see various collocations. This is actually from a coursebook unit I was teaching recently on technology. These were the different vocabulary items from the unit that had appeared as we worked through it. This was towards the end of the unit. So we said, okay, they've got a path from beginning to end. All of these collocations connect to each other a little bit. There's one kind of connection that we're interested in, and it's the kind that we have here with delete to file, where we have a final consonant sound, delete, that connects to the following vowel, delete to file. We have other connections here, like change your settings, attach nothing here, download files. Okay, something happens here, but it's not the link that we want, or do a factory reset. Again, we have a link, but it's a vowel to a vowel, not a consonant to a vowel. The correct route to the end of the puzzle from start is only links between consonants and vowels. Take about 30 more seconds, see if you can find the end this time. You can exit anywhere in the top row. Looking for the examples with consonant-vowel links. Delete to file. Yeah, people are ending on D. So yeah, the final route, to charge a device, upload a photo, back up a file, where am I? Install an app, yeah, install an app, switch off your mobile, create an account. So here we have the same type of activity. This one's a little bit simpler in that they don't have to find a specific exit, they just can exit out the row. But we've adapted it to include a focus on how our words are connecting together, not only looking at the stress. So mazes can be a very versatile activity. They're relatively quick to design. And then for fast finishers, I've got loads of other things I can ask them to find. Okay, cool, fast finishers. Find where all the vowels connect to each other. Okay, fast finishers. We said that we saw this download files, this got deleted. Where else will this happen? It's all sorts of other things we can ask them to find here because we are now dealing with connected phrases. So there's lots of room for upward extension for our stronger students as well here. Which leads us into our next topic, which is starting to build phrases. Because we talked about stress with compounds. We looked at ways that we're starting to connect words and phrases together. We can also use words and phrases for stress. Have a look here. I have something weird. Each of these has a stress pattern. You can see the stress pattern on the right. For example, da 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 da. If we look, or for example, da da da. If we look, we can match these phrases to their stress pattern. For example, stop to think, da da da. Or actually there's a small mistake here. Listen to people think this should be large. Have a look through the others. See if you can find the matches to the stress patterns. Yeah, actually, I have the answers on the next slide. So here we can actually see the answers here. On the other hand, the da 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 da, issues with fluency, stop to think, pay extra attention, listen to people speak, feel completely natural. All right, this was got a typo in it. But prepared in advance, be asked to rehearse. So we can use these kind of longer patterns, not only with isolated words like attention, but we can also build phrases together with them. The longer these get, they can get a bit more challenging. Or if we want to systemize it a little bit more, we can also use things like expressions that follow one particular pattern to help learners get it, like the edge of a cliff, the da 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 da, the crest of a wave, the end of the earth, the apple of my eye, the bane of my existence, the Watson's my Holmes, the da 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 da. Getting these common stress patterns down is something that helps learners with fluency, because once they can start to build these phrases with stress patterns, then they can start chaining these longer phrases together. which gets us to chaining longer phrases together. In other words, starting to really look at connected speech, what we might call chunking, how we break words and phrases into chunks. Here you can see an activity. This is something which I was running in class recently-ish. Have a look through it. It's actually a vocabulary activity. It's not a pronunciation activity. Look through it. See if you can figure out what kind of vocabulary it's focusing on. Just one word, you'll see a whole bunch in this activity. Yeah, people have got it. Phrases we get. Because it's focusing all on the same phrase, this means we can get some fun things. Because let's imagine we're asking students to do this. They're about to work with these questions. They're about to do some tasks where they may need to produce them in some way. So we might be able to help them with the pronunciation. If we take 3, we can actually see some things that might happen with get. We can see the first one, the name of someone who got to better job, or get on well with, our consonant vowel linking that we had earlier. Or we've got the last time you got really angry, where we miss get, or we elide it. Once we've raised learners' awareness of this, we might let them practice pronouncing them a little bit, have them repeat after the teacher to can help. Before they start the activity, why not add a little bit extra? So we can look through the other sentences. We've given them 2 options. Get is either going to link to the next word, or we'll delete the T. 2 options. Yeah, it's a bit more complicated than that, but for this will be enough. Get them to think about it before they begin the activity, and then they can practice saying the questions to themselves as sort of rehearsal for the activity, especially if there's a bit of extra time. Keeping the pronunciation in the front of the student's mind. So it's not that we're doing a big, crazy pronunciation lesson, we're just encouraging the students to think about it before they move on to the next thing. If they're thinking about it, they might improve with it. We didn't necessarily need a big complicated rule for this. We just, hey, look, here's what happens with get. It's either this or this. We could give them the rule of, yes, when you have a final t or d sound followed by an initial consonant, this will lead to elision. Their eyes will glaze over, they'll roll into the back of their heads, they'll start thinking about lunch, they'll dissociate entirely. It's just going to scare them. At higher levels, they may be interested, but at lower levels especially, it's just going to be too much. The task that we provided, because it was vocabulary focused, because the same item kept coming up, it was naturally repetitive, which means cool, that means they get extra practice. And a question from earlier, how do we make pronunciation work communicative? Well, in this case, actually basing our pronunciation work on a Lexi's forward activity, on a Lexi's focused task, meant that, well, it's a bit easier to make things communicative. It's kind of hard to make elision communicative. It can be done. It's hard. Collocations with get are much easier to design tasks around. So, and lastly, it let us take these big abstract rules like when do we align to and duh, and make it very concrete. Okay, in this phrase with get, we don't pronounce the, or we don't pronounce the. In this one, we do because of this. Okay, cool. This is a bit more concrete. Gives me something I can latch onto a little bit more as a learner, which may make it a little bit more learnable, ideally. How are we doing that? Cool. Similar activities you can adapt in this way. Things like anything like guess the question, which is what they had before. Find someone who activities are very often good candidates for these. We often have find someone who to practice some sort of Lexi's or grammatical structure, meaning they're naturally quite repetitive. Find someone who's been to Paris. Find someone who's been parasailing. Find someone who's done this. Find someone who's done that. Anything involving sentence stems or prompts where they have something they can think about before they start doing the speaking activity. As an example, here's another recent activity I've done with our students at higher levels, had collocations with make or do. And we could do something very similar here. Pick out an example of connected speech. We could pick the same one. Has anyone done you a favor? Made in about face, bit of catenation there, made great strides, so elision. A lot of these same topics will come up repeatedly, but practicing them with different lexical sets helps the learners to internalize that rule. Cool. I think this is probably maybe the last thing we'll have time for today. We're going to look at one step bigger, which is this idea of breaking phrases apart. Is pronunciation, when we deal with it, we can deal with it in production-focused lessons. Everything we've looked at so far was really about getting the students to produce the language and then somehow practice it with games or with preparation or activities with Lexi's, what have you. Pronunciation is also very important for listening. Because my pronunciation, whatever it is my internal model for how things work. And so when I'm listening to someone, that's what my brain is searching for. It's searching for the way that I would say it. And the farther what I hear is from how I would say it, well, the harder it may be for me to recognize. So to have a look at how we might deal with this, here you can see a couple of people. Does anyone recognize these people? Does anyone know who either of them are? Yeah, but the person on the left, I see people correctly saying that this is Beyonce Knowles. No kidding, Taylor Swift. And on the right, it's that guy, Eddie Redmayne. Okay, the first person to get that one on a long time. Marina, that is technically correct. We'll allow it. So for those of you who don't know, he played Stephen Hawking in a film, but yes, technically correct. We will allow it. I've actually got a short interview section from the Graham Norton show. It's a British reality TV show. Variety show. It lots of interviews, things like this. I have a few of the things that they said. I've got them just here in my notes. I'm going to read them to you the way they say them. The first time I read them, I'd like you to count the number of words that you hear. So, for example, if it's I have a cat, 4 words. Easy peasy. Ready? Number 1. 5 sentences, by the way. Only counting words. 1. You're like one of my favorite actors. The correct answer is 8. We're counting contractions as 2 words. This time, listen again. Write what you hear. Anything you hear is okay. Just write what you hear. Don't worry if it's right or wrong. Number 1. You're like one of my favorite actors. We'll do this for a few more. Number 2. This time, count the words. You're like so ridiculously talented. How many words? 6. Cool. So this time the same. Listen, write what you hear. You're like so ridiculously talented. Okay, cool, we got it. Number 3, count the words. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to London. 10, that is the correct answer. Listen and write what you hear. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to London. 4, count the words. You know, like she didn't have a lot of money. The answer is 11. So listen, write what you hear. You know, she didn't have a lot of money. We'll see. Number 5, listen and count. So they're like, we're actually going to paint your teeth brown. 13 is the answer. Listen, write what you hear. So they're like, we're actually going to paint your teeth brown. That was the last one. So I'm going to show you the sentences here. These were the sentences from their audio. Now, this is what they said, but this isn't what they said. That's not how they said it. This is all a lie. What they actually said was, you're like one of my favorite actors. Can you try just on your own, say it to yourself like this? You're like one of my favorite actors. The second's the same. You're like so ridiculously talented. Try it this way, the wrong way. The next one. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to London. Don't worry about making this super clear. So I was like, yeah, okay, fine. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to London. Try it this way. The next one. You know, like she didn't have a lot of money. Try it this way. And the last one. So like, we're actually going to paint your teeth brown. Try it that way. Victoria, you're absolutely right. The nice thing about this activity is you hear what you hear and you're right. Because it's not what you hear that's wrong. It's the processing between that and what to write that gets a bit messy. So when we say, I hear this, yeah, that's probably right. This is what we heard. This on the left is not what we heard. What we heard is on the right. Now, this is not technical. This is not scientific. This is not right in any way, shape, or form, which means that we don't have to be super experts to do this. This is just what I hear when I do it. When you do it, it's the same, just what you hear, how that looks on the page. In a real lesson, we go through this, of course, we kind of give the students feedback. Is it a kind of torture? It is a little bit. But I have the actual part of the interview here. Have a listen. Listen to her telling the story. Taylor's going to be telling a story by the time she was embarrassed. The question is, well, why? See if you can notice anything else while you're listening to it.
There's a lot that people don't know about this story. Basically, I was auditioning for 2 roles in Les Mis, and I'd done a few auditions and gone to New York and whatever, and I think it had been established that I had more of a look of Cosette, but I had the range vocally of Eponine, so it was established that, like, I was there for a good time, not a long time. I wasn't gonna get this role. But they were like, you know, do you want to come to London for one last screen test, and you'll get to screen test with Eddie Redmayne? I'm like, this seems like an experience I want to have in my life. You're like one of my favorite actors. You're so ridiculously talented. And I was like, so yeah, I'll go to London.
So I'll stop it there for time's sake. But did we notice anything? Did we hear any familiar sentences? And actually, if we dial back just 3 seconds.
Ridiculously talented. And I was like, so yeah, I'll go to London.
So I was like, yeah, I'll go to London. It's the same sentence that we had before. So by picking, let's say, some more challenging sentences from the audio, which also showed good examples of how Taylor Swift is using these filler devices, it means that we can also now prepare the students more for listening. And again, when I prepared this for the session, I didn't do something crazy scientific. I just did what I heard. So that gets us to kind of a brief summary. There's another activity that you'll see when I send out the materials as well, that you might want to have a look at. But pronunciation is challenging because the way that it's taught isn't necessarily the way that it's often learned. Having this exposure, having this opportunity to see it and play with it in different ways, both as focusing on individual sounds and then building things up, looking at it in the context of words, looking at it, playing with it and how we connect it into phrases, helping the students to notice this both in short texts, in chunks of language, and in the things that they're listening to. It's not an either or. So we can do all of these things. All of these things help the students to make progress with pronunciation. So we still have a couple of minutes. I'd like to leave a couple of minutes for any remaining questions that we have. So is there anything, are there any remaining questions from the first part that haven't quite been answered yet? The question about the Scottish accent, by the way, is exactly what we just did with the TV show Outlander. There's your answer. Because they're all Scottish. It's also a good TV show. Any other questions that we have about pronunciation? We still have time for 1 or 2.
Victoria, you can unmute yourself if you would
Yeah,
like to
go
ask a
for it.
question.
Yeah, okay, hello. First of all, thank you very much for such a great example. I'm a Taylor Swift fan, so thank you very much for that. And my question is, so I have a fear that my students might feel overwhelmed with all this transcription things and so on. So how can we address such those situations when students are sort of reluctant to learning this stuff, and even though I explain that it's necessary and so on?
I'm going to ask a weird question, but bear with me. Does anyone here have a dog?
Yes.
A weird question. We're talking about students, not dogs, but bear with me. Have you ever tried to feed medicine to a dog specifically?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Good luck. You have to put it in something, right? So I would say that students in this case are somewhat similar. We don't want to give them everything all at once. That is overwhelming. But maybe a little bit of, if it's transcription that you want them to learn, a little bit here. I'm just going to mark this one sound in this one word today. I'm not even going to highlight. I'm just going to put it there. If I'm teaching the word shine, whatever, I might just put that sh phoneme on the board just so they have a record of it, just in case they see it and they make that connection, and slowly start incorporating these things. Or for example, when you start, because I don't use a whole lot of transcription usually, but for connected speech, yeah, it's very easy to show connected speech sometimes with transcription. So maybe that 2 or 3 sounds that are there that they need to know, as they go over time, they will start building up. It's the same for pronunciation focuses in general. If we try to cover all pronunciation in one lesson, they're going to die. They're going to run away. They're going to scream. It's going to be awful. Going back to the example with vocabulary collocations with get, it's only 2 options. It's A or B. It's a word they're familiar with. And it's really just preparing them for what comes next. So this bite-sized but consistent focuses on pronunciation over time. Build them up to where they want to be. So good pronunciation teaching. Of course, we can have pronunciation lessons. These are often extremely helpful. But also a consistent focus over time, balanced with the occasional hardcore pronunciation lesson, is really going to be that sweet spot for us. So a little bit over a long time is the answer. Cool. And I think Daria's going to come get me in a second. I think I'm out of time. So I'm going to wrap things up there. But you do have, in the session, the last slide, you'll see my contact info. If you do have questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any.
Chris, thank you so much for the session.